Good morning. My name is Luke Parker. I am a Trinity parishioner and have served as Trinity's senior warden during this most extraordinary year. I'm speaking to you today at the outset of our Fall Pledge campaign to ask that you join me in pledging to support Trinity for the coming year. Let me say a bit about why I plan to do so and why I think this is a good and holy thing to do. Today's reading from Paul's second letter to Timothy gives us a worthy theme. For this reason, I remind you to rekindle the gift of God that is within you through the laying on of my hands. For God did not give us a spirit of cowardice, but rather a spirit of power, of love, and of self-discipline. In the original Greek text, the gift God gives is to charisma, which we could just as well translate as the grace that God gives. Here we have a reminder, first of all, that God gives by grace, without any preconditions and without any expectation of something in return. Moreover, we see that we have already been given a spirit of power, of love, and of wisdom. What our translation gives as self-discipline is sophrosune, an ancient Greek concept of intelligent self-control that I'll phrase for now as wisdom. The rich irony here, and a vein of wisdom that I see throughout the gospel, is that we best access this gift by God's grace, this spirit of power, love, and wisdom, when we give of ourselves. I take Paul to communicate here that God gives such spirit not only to each of us individually, but to all of us collectively, in the confidence that what has been given is more than enough for everyone. It is partly for this reason, I think, that the prophet Jeremiah, in today's first lesson, condemns the one who gets a nice house for himself by cheating the people who actually built it. There is already more than enough for everyone, so why should any of us steal wages from a worker? Why should any of us deny our neighbor what they need and we could freely give? Now, as someone who studies dead languages and ancient cultures, I often marvel at the undreamt of material and physical well-being that I enjoy in comparison with even the wealthiest of those who lived 2 millennia ago. Just as I feel shame when I compare my resources with the millions living at this very moment with so much less. Our gospel reading today neatly illustrates the enigmatic nature of Jesus, but one message that I think we hear loud and clear across the gospel is that we do not need nearly as much money or stuff as we think we do, not to mention whatever honors or powers may be in vogue at the time. As someone who is among the wealthiest people to ever live, at least when I look beyond our city and our modern society's skewed scale, why should I find myself spending so much more of my resources than I give? God both shows and tells us that giving multiplies, but spending only spends. As I understand it, giving courageously kindles the spirit of power, love, and generosity because we are simply extending the gifts of God. The miraculous thing is that in extending those gifts, they do not diminish. In fact, we have more rather than less, and even find something where there seemed to be nothing. Loaves and fishes, anyone? The economy of God's giving defies the logic of exchange as well as the appetite for accumulation. We do not need to balance the transaction or build houses and storehouses to make the most of our gift of spirit. In the midst of my own relative abundance, I pray for the courage to give more and spend less. That is where I must reconcile my spiritual with my material accounts. And I know that to do so, I should make a greater share of my treasure serve God's economy instead of the buyers and sellers in today's marketplace. I will pledge a gift for Trinity now, and I urge each of us to give our own share as the Spirit moves us and as our treasure allows. This is a good and holy thing to do because I know that Trinity has given, is giving, and will keep giving to help us and our neighbors realize God's gift of spiritual love, power, and wisdom. We have sacrificed our regular gathering to worship. We feel this loss deeply, even though we know that in doing so, we are serving and indeed saving life for all of God's people. The church building may not fill up every Sunday, but Trinity's heart beats on. Our staff and our people are working as hard and harder than ever to bring more of God's gifts to fruition. Right now, you are enjoying the fruits of their careful planning, practice, and technical wizardry. We have expanded our partnership with Wheel to offer 24-hour shelter to women who need safe and stable housing more than ever. We have kept up monthly community dinners with Wheel, though for now we offer them prepackaged with our love, fellowship, and prayers. We give our space to artists, safely recording performances to broadcast. Many parish groups continue to meet virtually for fellowship as well as ministry, and a number of us have just embarked on a months-long project of discussing racial reconciliation through the church's Sacred Ground program. We have also been blessed to call and find new leadership in the Reverend Beth Fitzgibbons. All this speaks to a vibrant present, though it may not feel that way always or for all of us, and it also heralds a bright future. Trinity is still living its spirit of power, love, and wisdom, as I think it has for a long time and will for a long time to come. I am speaking in part from my own admittedly anecdotal experience, and this will meander for a moment, but come together soon enough, I hope. So 10 years ago, I spent my summer cycling from Jacksonville, Florida to San Francisco. I was part of a group riding with Bike and Build, a nonprofit that organizes cross-country rides every year, except this one, unfortunately, to support affordable housing. Our group crossed Florida, rode along the Gulf of Mexico to New Orleans, where we spent a week working to rebuild homes destroyed by Hurricane Katrina. Now this is 2010, and 5 years after the storm, the wounds had hardly just begun to heal. Shortly after we dipped our wheels in the Atlantic, though, the offshore drilling rig, Deepwater Horizon, exploded. This meant that as soon as we saw the Gulf, we saw bright orange oil booms and the iridescent sheen of the oil they could hardly contain. I or anyone could hardly believe it. Calamity on top of calamity. Just when a community begins to cope with one disaster, here comes another. I often found the lyrics of Memphis Minnie's When the Levee Breaks playing in my head as I pedaled, just as I sometimes wonder now when the levee might break. Riding 75 miles a day against prevailing winds is tough enough, but seeing those oil booms along hundreds of miles of already decimated coastline would depress anyone. Instead, I was impressed by the churches. The majority of our meals, and certainly the heartiest ones, were offered up by congregations of all stripes from Florida to California. We rolled out our sleeping bags in sanctuaries, and even more often in members' own homes. People gave us rides, showers, a quick swim, sweet corn, ice cream. I could go on and on. The generous spirit of those churches was a prime mover in my own journey back to Christian faith, as I begin to understand that our doctrines and dogmas about the gospel matter far less than how we choose to live in light of it. It took just a few mornings at Trinity for me to sense that this place and its people strive both to live in that light and to share it as freely and as openly as we can. I feel my own spirit by the power, love, and wisdom at work here. This was especially confirmed for me recently, and here is where Trinity somewhat miraculously intersects with that trip that I made 10 years ago. In the midst of everything else this summer, the bike that I rode across the country was stolen, despite it being well locked in a locked garage. The day after the bike was stolen, I met with our stewardship committee, who are leading our pledge drive and kindly invited me to speak to you today. I mentioned my unfortunate loss in passing, and a member of the committee, whom I hardly knew, immediately offered to give me a bike. The gift was made on the spot with no questions asked except to ascertain my needs and fit. He then made an extra effort to tune the bike up, kit it out, and by the end of that week, I was back on two wheels. Thank you again, Noel. I give thanks both to you and to God every time I ride. I knew then, as I know now, that Trinity has that spirit of power, love, and wisdom given to us in the grace and abundance of God. Despite this dreary season of loss, anxiety, and deprivation that we're living through, and indeed all the more so because of it, I and my family are pledging a gift to Trinity. I pray that each of you will do the same, because I know that through our gifts, Trinity will continue to courageously realize the gift of God's power, love, and wisdom for a world that will surely need it as badly as ever. Amen.